So, I have discussed the Metroid Prime Trilogy showing up on the Switch many times on this channel. I'm sure most of you guys who've been around for a while have probably seen a lot or all of these videos and discussions, even some of the podcasts I've been on. The topic comes up quite a lot, especially when I'm around, because people love to talk about Metroid when I'm discussing video games. And it's not like there's necessarily new traction on like a confirmation of a Metroid Prime Trilogy coming to the Switch. There is some excitement and motion about when Nintendo may or may not be finally giving us more information on Metroid, whether it's Prime 4 or the trilogy or both. But in thinking about the Metroid Prime Trilogy, I realized, obviously, I still have a lot to say. I ain't done talking about this, man. I'm gonna keep the dream alive until Nintendo shoots it down for good or finally makes it a reality. So that's what we're gonna do. Let's dissect some of how the Metroid Prime Trilogy could actually work. The general concept, like I said, is how to make the Metroid Prime Trilogy work on the Nintendo Switch, because many people want to see this happen. Many people believe it's going to happen. I absolutely believe it's going to happen. It makes so much sense, it's unreal, especially in a world where we know Metroid Prime 4 is a real game. I mean, it was really, once that E3 reveal happened last year, and everyone got excited about, oh my god, a Metroid Prime 4 is a reality, it's coming, we'll be playing it on our Switches eventually, it's so cool. And that's when a few people, myself being one of them, started this conversation about a year and a half ago. And the conversation got bigger and bigger. I feel like I was kind of in on the ground floor of that conversation on the internet, getting people excited about the idea. And again, reminder, Nintendo truly hasn't given us much to go on. It's, for the most part, it's a lot of hope, it's a lot of wishful thinking, but it's also a lot of, I think, business-minded sense if we kind of approach it from the perspective of why would it make sense for Nintendo to do it? Why would we believe Nintendo would do it business-wise? That's when it starts to feel a little bit more real. But obviously, I don't want to give anyone any false hope, like there's actually this confirmed inside behind-the-scenes rumors or anything about whether or not it may or may not happen soon. This is really just about a fan, you guys as fans, talking about how to make this thing actually work. And I think that that's the real key here. What would actually make the Prime Trilogy work on the Switch? How different would it need to be? How many changes or updates would they need to be? How much could they get away with maybe making not a lot of changes or updates? I mean, you could imagine probably, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 different quality versions of the Prime Trilogy coming to the Switch in different ways, depending on how much time and effort Nintendo spent on it. You know, a good example would be like the Twilight Princess HD remake that they did for the Wii U, which I thought was great, but a lot of people feel like they took the bare bones approach as far as what they allowed the gamepad to do or how much they upgraded the visuals, stuff like that. And to be fair, I actually kind of agree with a lot of that, but overall, I still thought it looked beautiful, and I just loved being able to play the game again in HD. I do think they could have done more with the gamepad. Mostly because the way they treated the gamepad in the Wind Waker was so good, and they didn't quite nail it with Twilight Princess. So either way, that's a whole different franchise. When we think about the Prime Trilogy coming to the Switch, it's a different conversation because I think that there are some very specific things that they would need to get right in order to port it. The main thing, I mean, we can talk about the graphics, we can talk about the sound, we can talk about if it's digital or physical or both, we could talk about if they only brought Metroid Prime or if they decided to do a Prime Trilogy, the whole thing. I mean, there's 100 things, but one of the biggest things, I think the main thing for me, would be the control. And you can see I have a variety of controllers representing a variety of Nintendo gaming generations here on my desk. And when we think about how to make Metroid Prime work on the Switch, as much as the visuals or the packaging, the availability is something, I think about how to play these games. How are we controlling Samus? So like I said, let's be real here. The control, I think, is the key factor here. Yes, I want to see a very particular kind of beautiful upgrade to the graphics of the Metroid Prime games coming to the Switch. I really hope Nintendo does do something like that. But if they don't, it's not going to be as important to me as how they make the game feel. I mean, visually, I could see them doing just a straight port. It's just a standard definition, you know, barely upgraded resolution, and just boom, there you go, put it on the Switch. I could see it being digital only. I could see it being physical and digital. I could see it being given just a straight HD polish and HD sheen, similar to, like I said earlier, Twilight Princess. I don't know if I could see them doing like a significant remake where they redid like all of the models and the textures and the particle effects and the lighting. That would be god tier amazing. They could sell that trilogy collection for $150. And if they straight up redid all of the visuals for all 3 of those games, it would be worth it. And that's why I don't think many of us would expect that. But hey, man, when you think about it, it's possible. Look at what's happened before with games like, I don't know, Shadow of the Colossus on the PlayStation 4. That's essentially what they did there, and what if Nintendo wanted to take the same approach here? So either way, those are the different things we could see with the visuals, but controlling Samus is the interesting thing to me. Now, one of the reasons I've said in many of my previous conversations about the Prime Trilogy on the Switch, as far as justifying why I think it would make sense, is possibly introducing players who might not be familiar with the Prime games to the controls of this series. Especially because Metroid Prime 4 is very likely going to be a lot of people's either first Metroid game or even their first Metroid Prime game. Yes, the Prime series of games did sell pretty darn well for the Metroid series and for the different times that they released and the consoles that they released on. But I think that the way stuff sells on the Switch in this current era of Nintendo, especially first-party stuff, when Nintendo puts their marketing blitz madness behind a game, which I believe they will for Prime 4, I really feel like either a lot of lapsed Nintendo gamers or young gamers who never played Metroid will be playing Prime 4 for the first time. It's going to get into a lot of hands and a lot of new players' hands. And because the game's controlled so differently, I mean, whether you're talking about the original GameCube release or the motion controls once that was introduced, I'm sure a lot of people will be surprised at how the game feels. When you go back to the original 2 games, I mean, it's really Metroid Prime and Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. Those are the 2 GameCube releases. For anyone who may or may not know, that's where the series started. 2002 and 2004 on the GameCube. Now, those games, using the GameCube controller, is one of the most weird, wacky, and non-conventional ways to play a first-person perspective shooter-adventure game you will ever play on a console. Because the way they use that GameCube controller and the way you control Samus is just very, very super different. And to be fair, I would think a lot of people would feel like those controls haven't aged. And I get that. I happen to love them from a nostalgic perspective because it's how I spent the first 2 Metroid Prime games and the first couple of years of my Metroid Prime gaming life playing the series, and so it was just how I always knew it, and so I feel like I still have that muscle memory in me to be able to control the game that way, where you're not really like, you're not freeform looking with one of the analog sticks. You can't just get Samus to look up, down, left, right, diagonal, whatever. You've got to hold in a trigger. I don't even remember now if it is the left or the right trigger. I believe it's the left trigger. So here I am talking about I have muscle memory, and now I can't remember until I probably was playing it in my hand. But you hold down one of the triggers, and that allows Samus to stand in place. She puts her arm on her arm cannon, and then she allows herself to look up and down and around and do all these different things and do your lock-on. And it has this combination of like the Z targeting introduced in like Zelda with the Ocarina of Time, and this weird stop and pivot and look around sort of first-person thing that's very unique and very different. Instead of using a trigger to fire the arm cannon, you're pressing the A button, and you're using the triggers to lock onto things and to get Samus to be able to look around. Super different than normal first-person controls. Then, of course, we get to the Wii games, which was Metroid Prime 3, and then, of course, the Trilogy Collection, where they added the Prime 3 motion controls using the Wii Remote Nunchuck to the games. And hey, I have a fond memory and love of those GameCube controls, but let's be real. The pointer controls for the Wii absolutely made the game better. I mean, it was just better controls. It was the best use of the Wii Remote that they ever did. Absolutely loved it. And so you have these 2 unconventional ways to control a game that the Prime series was known for, and then you have the more traditional way to control a first-person game the way we do now with everything else and every other shooter on a console with your dual analog sticks and your triggers as your fire button. And so, essentially, you're looking at 3 different ways to control a Metroid Prime game. For me, the best way to make a Metroid Prime Trilogy work on the Switch and to prepare people for Metroid Prime 4 is absolutely to offer all 3 versions, all 3 options of control. And I know for a lot of people, the first thing you might think of is, okay, I don't want those damn GameCube controls, get those out of my life. And I get it, and at the end of the day, it is the one control option I would be willing to sacrifice. I would be super sad about it. I don't think that they should be sacrificed. I think it would be a fantastic sort of love letter and way to show respect and appreciation for the old school Prime fans to include those as an option to play the game. But at the end of the day, if they weren't there, it wouldn't super bother me, because clearly they're going to need to have a couple of options to control the game anyway. I mean, whether we're talking about the Prime Trilogy or even Prime 4, because a lot of these controls may or may not make it over into Prime 4. That's again why I think the Prime Trilogy makes sense. Get people prepared for the way you control a Prime game before 4 comes out. I feel like they need to have a way for people to play Metroid Prime portable. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. So having motion controls would be great, but that could truly only work on a TV. What about the portable play? And that's the key, man. Bringing the Prime Trilogy over to the Switch means that Nintendo has to provide us with options. I think if they brought these 3 games, or even one of them, I mean, let's say they brought just a remaster of Prime 1. I mean, not likely, but who knows? Whatever they were to do as far as bringing these old games to the Switch, they've got to consider the control. And this was the last, best, and most efficient way they allowed people to play Metroid Prime with this awesome motion control. And the great thing is, as we all know, these bad boys could be a great substitute for this. I mean, they literally can do essentially the same thing. And so when I think about the Metroid Prime Trilogy coming to the Switch, man, I love the idea of them giving us the motion control options that the Joy-Cons could provide. That right Joy-Con with the IR sensor could work perfectly to duplicate this whole looking around thing. It would be fantastic. You've got your nunchuck as your left Joy-Con, and it just all works. But of course it's got to go portable. Of course, some people, even today, are going to hate the idea of motion control, and they would hate doing this with their Joy-Cons to play a Metroid Prime game or a first-person game of any kind. And so, in order to not alienate people, as much as I think Prime works best with weird controls, I think it would be amazing if they gave us, I don't know, just like a traditional control where you're using your dual analog sticks to play a Metroid Prime game. I'm not going to lie, guys. It's not the way I would want to play a Prime game, but I would love to try it. I would love to experience a Prime experience, whether it's one of the old games or even Prime 4, with the traditional dual analog setup, the way you play Halo or Call of Duty or something. I mean, I would be curious to see what it's like for sure. There's no question. But I still think about this darn thing, man. You guys, this is my favorite controller of all time, okay? And the way this, oh my god, just putting it in my hands, the way it felt to play Prime, using these triggers to do something different and your A button to shoot, it worked really well. You know, the first 2 games were designed around it, so I feel like offering those options for a Prime Trilogy coming to the Switch, for example, I think that would be a great way to do it, because at least those first 2 games were built around that. With Prime 4, it could be a different story, of course, because Prime 4 won't be built around the idea of a GameCube controller. So they're building that around the idea of the Joy-Cons, or just a standard Pro controller in a world where there isn't a Wii Remote and Nunchuck anymore. But we do have the decent substitute, so whatever they're doing with Prime 4, I expect great usage of the Joy-Cons, and it's why I think they want the Prime Trilogy to get people excited about the series, excited about Samus, and getting used to the controls, and seeing what it was like to play these games and how they're so different. And I just think that if they gave all 3 control options, it would be a match made in heaven. So what do you guys think about this, man? Do you think that a lot of the success of a Prime Trilogy on the Switch, specifically, rests on how they allow us to control the game? Obviously, I do. Yes, the visuals matter, and how it's packaged, how it's priced, all of these different things, they matter. We're all curious about it. I would like to see certain things happen in those areas, but at the end of the day, I would sacrifice a lot of things in those areas just to make sure we have the right ability to control the games, because it was different when they made it on the GameCube, it was different when they made it on the Wii, and now the Switch is a whole different beast than both of those. So what are they going to do? They've got to do options. I think Nintendo nowadays has learned they can't force too many things on people. They need to give us options. They're still not there yet. I mean, the voice chat and the phone app thing is a perfect example of how they're still not there yet. But there's been plenty of other examples where we've realized that they do understand options make a difference to the consumer. And when it comes to Metroid fans, boy, are we a fickle, loud, rowdy bunch, as we all learned. You can be our worst enemy if you do something stupid like Metroid Prime Federation Force reveal, but you could also be our greatest ally if you do something amazing like a Metroid Prime 4 and a Samus Returns announcement all in the same day. you know, one of the best days ever in Metroid history. So it's just all about how they decide to do things. And I have so much faith in Nintendo right now. Yes, they still do dumb things like online, I get it. But in general, with their game development, with what they've been doing with the Metroid franchise the past 2 years, I've got nothing but faith. So I think that the Prime Trilogy will be coming. I don't know when, but I think it's going to be coming. And I think that they know giving us the option to control those games in a bunch of different ways, whether it's traditional first person, whether it's Wii Remote Motion Control, whether it's old school classic GameCube like tank controls, if you want to call it the first person equivalent to tank controls, like Resident Evil tank controls. Whatever you want to do, give us some or all of those, and I think that you can't possibly let anyone down. And what's great is I think the Prime games could work with the traditional Halo-style dual analog combat. Like, I think it could work. So that's why I said I would be interested to kind of give it a shot. But I gotta tell you, if the Prime Trilogy came, and even Metroid Prime 4, and if all of those games included the GameCube control, I kind of think I might be one of the only people that might play these games all with the GameCube control. Because, again, it's not that it's, like, good by today's standards, because it's, like, it's not. But I love it, man. And like I said, I know, whatever triggers you're using, whatever. I know I've got that muscle memory. If I actually powered one of the games on and played it with the GameCube controller, within a second, I would remember everything about how to do it perfectly, which triggers do what. I could do so many fancy jumps where I'm jumping, but then also trigger looking down while after I'm midair. It's crazy. It was just, I just turned into like a complete machine playing through the first two games with the GameCube controller. So I feel like I could do it even with a brand new Prime 4, but I don't know that we should expect GameCube controls for a Prime 4. I would just like to see it at least added to the Prime Trilogy collection on the Switch, if it actually happens. So, what do you guys think? Like I said, do you think it comes down to the controller, or do you think it's the other factors, or a combination of all of them? Whatever it is, man, Metroid Prime love. It's an exciting time. Hopefully at the Game Awards in a couple of weeks, we actually see some Metroid love. Prime 4, Prime Trilogy, all the above. Who knows? Let's just hope. Let's keep hope alive, man. Keep the dream alive. So that is it for me today. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Ro2R Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.